Hey gamers, in this episode I'm going to show you how to use a plot diagram. Hey gamers, welcome back to Game Master's Dungeon. I'm Brian, your Game Master. And today we're going to talk about, after everything that we've learned so far, so our plot devices, story elements, all that stuff that I've talked about in this GM Study Hall series, we're going to finally start moving on toward writing our story. And the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to get ourselves a plot diagram. Now, you don't have to use a plot diagram. I find it helpful in writing stories for my games. It helps me organize my thoughts. Now, this isn't like a long, drawn-out process. This isn't like writing a novel. This is just a diagram with some notes detailing certain things that are going to happen in your story. Now, what happens, the details of each particular section, that we're going to cover later. But this is just get the plot diagram, get it filled out. That's going to give us an outline of our story, and then we're going to build from there. So with that, let's go ahead and load one up here and let's take a look. All right, gamers. So here we are. Here's a basic plot diagram that I found online. Now, this one is not form fillable. I couldn't find me a decent one, but this is just an example. Okay, there's several other resources you could go online and find, like online form fillable ones that you could fill out and then print or copy, download, whatever. I just want to show you what one looks like and what you're going to do with it. Okay, so first thing we're looking at, all right, so we've got an idea for our story. You've looked at some of the other videos that I've got, hopefully, and going to take some of that and include it into your story. And you're like, okay, so now I'm ready to start writing my story. Here's where we start. So this right up here, like name, title, story, author, right? You don't have to really worry about this. Your main characters, these are going to be your player characters. Okay, Bob, Sally, Jim, whatever. Now, like I've said before, I would not go into story writing until I have my players create all of their characters. Now, why, you ask? Well, obviously, you're going to write a story about these characters. They're going to be the protagonists. The story is going to center around them. They're going to be the center of the action. You're going to want those characters created. Like if I'm writing a novel or a screenplay, I'm going to have my characters developed and defined. And then I'm going to go from there. I'm going to build my world and my story around them. So have all that done first. Okay? Next, you're going to pick a time and a place for your setting. So when is it? Is it 2018 in Chicago, like it is in my Vampire the Requiem game? Or are you playing Dungeons and Dragons? It's medieval times, and it's in, like a medieval Europe in the 1400s or whatever. This is where you're going to put that. You're going to want to make sure you've really developed your setting. Check my video on setting, theme, and mood to get some ideas on what you can do with that. Okay? Now, you look at this. We got this big half triangle here. Or this triangle. This is the basic template. Okay? This down here is the exposition, right? This is a brief introduction of the characters, setting, and opening situation. So when you start your game, this is going to be your first game session. Okay? This is where you're going to introduce all of the characters. You're going to introduce them all to each other. You're going to have the player characters describe their characters to everyone. If they're already together, like as a group, this is where you're going to describe how that happened. Or maybe they haven't joined up as a group and you're starting slightly before that. Then you're going to have some events that are going to lead up to them forming a group. Because most role-playing games have a group of players that go around in the game and go through the story. So this is where all that's going to come into play. You're going to talk about the setting, the characters, and how you're going to open your story. Okay? Now, the rising action, these are a series of events which lead to the climax, which is up here. Okay? But first you got to talk about the conflict. Okay? This is what you got to think about. Okay, what is the conflict of the story? Like, what's driving these events? What's going to drive the characters to get to the climax, to drive them through the story? Always go into your game with this. Conflict has to be a huge part of the story. Every movie, book you write, there's always some kind of conflict. It doesn't necessarily have to be with the big bad villain, right? It could be just with an antagonist, someone with opposing views. How are they going to interact with and deal with those situations? And then the rising action here, like I said, the series of main events which lead to the climax. These are going to be things that are going to go on in your game, okay? Now, this isn't going to be like, letter for letter, like everything that's going to happen in the game. No, it's going to be different events, right? So you start with your exposition. And then your first game, you introduce your conflict. Maybe the villain does show up, okay? Say we're playing Mutants and Masterminds. Everybody's already part of like a super group. Maybe they've just formed a superhero team. And then a villain shows up and does some dastardly deeds, right? So now you've got your conflict, all right? The players are established. The villain shows up, robs the bank, whatever, destroys part of the city, whatever you're going to have your villain do. This is going to set the stage. That's going to help us move up, okay? Obviously, the climax, the turning point of the story, this is where the showdown is going to happen. All right, how are we going to get from the beginning, when we first start our superhero group, in our example, and the villain shows up, to how are we going to get to the showdown? Now, this is all these little events here in the middle, this rising action, is how we're going to get there. It could be, we're going to take out their lieutenants. We're going to undermine their financial assets, all this other stuff. Have these events you're going to plan out that could be maybe an individual story. Maybe you're going to play a long chronicle or a campaign. Oh, excuse me. And then each event could be a story of its own. Now, with that, if you're going to do it like that, each event, then you would create another one of these diagrams, right? The beginning of that story, what's going on, what's the conflict of that particular event, how are you going to get to the climax of the event, and then what's going to happen afterwards, okay? So you're not just going to use one of these, you're possibly going to use lots of them. So be ready. It's going to be a lot of work for you, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's going to keep your thoughts fluid, and it's going to help map things out so everything goes in a nice direction that you want. Now, obviously, the characters are going to do things in there that might divert different things, but always have a plan in action of how you're going to get back to where you need to go, okay? So back to the original one. So you're going to have all these events then that the characters are going to go through. Maybe each one is a different game session. And then say after 10 or whatever, we're going to get to the climax. Now we're going to have the showdown. Or this is the turning point of the story. Say you're not going to fight the villain. Maybe it's something else. Maybe this is where you divert, the meteor heading for the planet or whatever else. The meteor's coming. Okay, we've got 3 weeks until this meteor's going to strike. How are we going to stop it? Right? That's your conflict. All these events, the research and other ideas and other options you're going to try to do that maybe fail, and it's going to end up to be like, okay, this is how we're going to have to do it. There's your climax. Okay? So then once the climax, the villain's defeated or the asteroid or meteor is destroyed or diverted, the following action. Events that follow the climax. Logical result of the climax. So we defeat the villain, right? So now this following action is maybe where we're gonna clean up his or her evil empire or evil syndicate or whatever. We're gonna get everybody arrested, all this other stuff. Clean up the streets, get all the crime and the riffraff, put them in jail. Resolution, the outcome of the conflict is the end, right? So we go all the way up, we fight the villain, we clean up the organization, the resolution. The city is now free of this oppressive, evil overlord or whatever. Now the city is back to normal, normal operation, normal everyday thing. People aren't living in fear and terror, and there's not robbery and destruction and mayhem in the city. There's your resolution. Okay? Now, remember, right, if you're going to have different events in here, each one of these plot diagrams will represent one of these. You're going to have one of these plot diagrams representing a certain event in here, and you're going to follow the same path. Okay? Start of the game, right? What's going on in this event? What's the struggle? Where's it going to end? Like, how are we going to overcome the situation? What's going to happen following that? And then what's the overall outcome? Okay? Keeps your thoughts nice and tidy. Now, this is just where you make notes, and then you would go into your other notebook or on your computer, then you would detail more information about particular things that go on in here. This is just your diagram to keep your mind clear and on focus, and also will help make your stories seem very, I don't want to say linear as like a bad word, because most people think role-playing games are not supposed to be linear, but you're telling a story, and stories are linear in a point, right? You're going from the beginning to the end of the story. How you get there will be up to the characters, or so they think. They will have a lot of sway, but you will inevitably bring them back to where they go, or where they need to go. Okay? All right. So let's do a little wrap-up. Right, gamers. So that was just an example of a plot diagram. Now, why is it important? Like I said, right, it's really going to help keep you focused, keep your thoughts clear and concise. A lot of things that I've done in the past, I try to just, off the top of the head, shoot from the hip kind of thing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I've gone into using something similar to this to keep my thoughts focused. I've got a reference. Okay, well, this event is done. What's the next event that's going to lead us to the climax? Boom, okay? Is it another game? Is we playing a longer session? Are we going to go directly into the next event? That's really up to you and how you run your games and the length of your games. But just know that each event really should be its own little mini plot. Like my video says, plots and subplots, right? That's totally acceptable for this right here, right? Because then you're going to be able to plan each event out. That's going to help you develop characters, right? Develop the villain, breathe life into the setting and the theme of your story, and it's going to help you create a very immersive role-playing experience, which I guarantee your players will enjoy for years to come afterwards. So with that, I hope you liked that video. I hope it helps you out. Some of you may already be using something like this, or maybe some of you newer GMs or people maybe looking to start GMing. Maybe this is something, I didn't even think about that. So if you did like it, give me a thumbs up. Also, if you like my content, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you get instant notification when I upload new content, so you can be the first to view and to comment. Also, you can join me over in Discord. There will be a link down in the description below. We're getting quite a large number of people over there, having some really good conversations. I would love to see you over there and joining in. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at GameMastersDone1, where I'll be posting updates on what's going on in my gaming life, like the games that I'm running and how things are going and other stuff like that. Plus, I would like to see what you guys are doing. You can either put that over on Twitter or in the comments of the appropriate video down below. I want to see them either way. So with that, until I see you again in the dungeon, I'm Brian, your Game Master, and happy gaming.